So hello again, everyone. I'm Julia Jessen. I'm the Curator of Collections and Exhibitions at the Cedar Rapids Museum of Art. Tonight I'll be discussing Margaret Lanzetta's Untitled from 1994, which is made with graphite on mylar and measures 63 3/4 inches by 42.5 inches, and it was a gift of Sally and Win Kramarski. This work is currently on view in Beyond the Object, Women Working in Abstraction, which runs until October 26th of 2025. To get into Margaret Lanzetta, she attended the Skowhegan School in Maine and the Tyler School of Art in Rome, and she also received a Master of Fine Arts degree from the School of Visual Arts in New York. Much of her work revolves around repetitive patterns used on the surface of industrial materials or mixed with textiles and printed imagery on a panel or a canvas surface. This piece that we're focusing on certainly does demonstrate that interest in repetitive patterns. Lanzetta has said about her work, quote, "My work explores the confluence of organic, cultural, and industrial motifs," end quote. So she often uses stamping, rubbing, printing. She very rarely works with brushes in her work. She comes out of a sculpture tradition. And at this time, so in the early 90s, she was working with these materials on long industrial mylar panels. That mylar itself is also an interesting material. It's a manufactured plastic, but the translucency of the mylar gave it some interest for the artist. And she also is often thinking about textile traditions in her work, about this sort of accumulative and repetitive process that's involved in creating textiles. I want to get a little bit into some of her influences and some of her other work. So Lanzetta has actually traveled very extensively in India, Japan, Southeast Asia, and North Africa. And it's her travels to all of these different places that really inform a lot of her imagery that she's using in her work. Cultures, notions of hybridity, migration patterns, and also the textiles that she's often investigating how these world decorative traditions relate to contemporary cultural, political, and environmental narratives. So in some of her more recent work, she'll combine globally sourced patterned textiles with painting and silk screening and these very, very old motifs. She'll also mimic the accumulative process of weaving by layering up these images, or in the case of this piece, on paper that's then mounted onto canvas. She's working very much in kind of a pattern and decorative sort of movement. Going back in time a bit to around the same time as when our work that we're focusing on tonight was created in the early 90s. She had worked primarily as a sculptor, and she created pieces like that, which you see on your screen here. For this group, she wove rubber strips that feel at the same time very organic, but also quite machine-like too. She definitely credits some inspiration coming from Eva Hesse. She actually moves away from the three-dimensional a bit into two-dimensional around 1992. But when she does that, she didn't want to sacrifice her interest in physically repetitive, meditative processes. And so her sculpture processes transformed into those processes that I mentioned before, that of stamping, rubbing, and printing. Two-dimensional works that she created in 1993 and 1994. So her artistic vocabulary is really broadening at this time, for again, thinking about these intersections of nature and industry. In the late 90s, this interest continues. These are a couple of pulp paintings that she created during a workspace residency grant through Dieudonné. And here she's combining industrial organic systems, really layering things up using this patterning. Moving into the 2000s, she's combining references derived from machine parts and the surface textures of steel plates, along with floral patterns and architectural ornamentation, as well as her use of a really intense saturated color. But at the same time, she also works in black and white. This piece, It's All Spiritual from 2010, creating something that is very decorative and feels at the same time very far removed from the previous piece where she's working in these bright colors. She also created multiple different series and has worked in series throughout her career. And these are the company paintings. So these were conceived and completed after a 6-month Fulbright Research Fellowship to India and Syria in 2008. She limited herself to using 4 silk screens, printed in different color combinations. The title for the series, Company Paintings, comes from the term for works commissioned by the East India Company to document India in the middle of the 18th century. She's underscoring that ongoing clash between modern technology and ancient traditions. Another series from a little bit later, the 2010 to 2018 American Time series. In these works, she's incorporating Asian cultural and architectural motifs. Place is something that resonates really strongly throughout Lanzetta's work. And in this series, Some Worlds from 2018 to 2019, these documented this kind of physical response that she had to place. All of the patterns here are sourced from areas of the world where she lived in the 30 years prior to this series. And in them, she thought about fusing the decorative with fine arts. She thought about incorporating organic motifs with Islamic geometry. And to create them, she used unregistered silk screens. The ink that she's using there is infused with mica to create this sort of metallic surface. Now, she didn't turn entirely away from sculpture. From 2016 to 2020, she worked on this series called Royal Flush. And so with this series, she explores the opulence and magnificence of crowns as a decorative object, but something that's often adorned with perhaps nefarious political symbols, really kind of questioning some of these different things. So they have kind of a fairy tale-esque quality to them, but at the same time, they also seem to indicate power and kind of an omnipotent or autocratic power. This is something that she started as part of a residency that she did at Greenwich House Pottery. Coming back to where we started, throughout her career, Lanzetta continually questions industry and nature, notions of power, systems of oppression, through the use of those juxtaposed patterns and her often very methodical and meditative process of working.